trusted both of you. That was my first mistake. You know that feeling when everything looks perfect on the outside, but deep down, something's not quite right. That's my life. A beautiful house in Savannah, Georgia. A kind husband with a charming smile. A doting mother-in-law who brings sweet tea and homemade peach cobbler. Everyone tells me I'm lucky. Even I believe it until the truth starts to leak through the cracks. Brandon and I have been married for 6 years. We met at a neighborhood barbecue, the kind where someone's cousin is always trying to set you up. He's tall, confident, and funny in that southern way, charming, but never too much. We moved quickly, maybe too quickly, but at the time, it felt like destiny. We bought a house with a wraparound porch, had a daughter named Emma, and began building what I thought was a peaceful, stable life. He worked in real estate, and I taught preschool part-time so I could be home with Emma most afternoons. His mother, Elaine, lived just 20 minutes away. She called herself a real Southern mama. And that was true in every way, always impeccably dressed, always carrying plates of food and unsolicited advice. At first, she treated me like a second daughter. She'd stop by to check on Emma, make me take breaks, or just show up with groceries we didn't need. I thought she was nice. I thought she loved me. But lately, Brandon has been different, not in a dramatic, yelling way, more like a subtle distraction. He started coming home later, blaming traffic or last-minute client meetings. He stopped asking about my day. Sometimes he'd glance at his phone and smile, then quickly turn the screen away. And once, just once, I caught a whiff of a strange perfume on his shirt. It was floral. Not my scent. Not Emma's shampoo. Something unfamiliar. I brushed it off. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Marriage has its seasons, right? Maybe he was stressed. Maybe I was being paranoid. Then comes the receipt. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was doing laundry, the kind of mindless chore that usually clears my head. Brandon had left early for what was supposed to be a day trip to Atlanta. When I checked his bag, I pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a receipt from the Gray, one of the most expensive restaurants downtown. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine. The timestamp was 7:48 p.m., the very night he said he'd been stuck in traffic, too tired to talk. My heart didn't break. It just paused, like it was waiting to see what my brain would do with the information. I folded the receipt and stuffed it into my apron pocket. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared out the window, watching the dogwoods sway in the wind, and I felt something change inside me. That evening, Brandon came home with his usual tired smile. He kissed Emma on the forehead, avoided my eyes, and disappeared into the bathroom. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Elaine. She answered on the first ring. "Hello? Honey, is everything okay?" Her voice was as sweet as syrup. I cleared my throat. "Yeah, just checking in. Have you seen Brandon this week? Did he mention having dinner with you Monday night?" There was a pause. Just a beat too long. "Oh, yes, he did," she said quickly. "He took me to the Gray. You know how much I love their scallops?" My blood ran cold. I never mentioned the restaurant. I was silent for a moment. "Sounds good. Glad you two got to spend some time together." "Oh, you know," she said, laughing. I always tell him to spend time with his mother. We hung up. My hands were shaking. She was lying, and not even feeling well. Elaine was always calm, but that pause long enough to figure out how to cover it was all I needed. It's not just Brandon. Elaine is helping him. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to him, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering how long this had been going on. I felt like I was in a play where everyone had a script but me. The next morning, I went to Target and bought a new notebook. Nothing fancy, just a simple, spiral-bound notebook with a pale blue flower on the cover. I jotted down a single sentence written in permanent marker. The truth they don't want to tell me. And then I started writing. Every lie, every strange look, every receipt and text and change in tone. Every time Elaine happened to stop by when Brandon was late. Every excuse, every silence. I wrote it all down. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. But I do know this: they're working together. And I'm not going to be the idiot quietly dismantling it in the corner. No, I will be the woman who sees the storm coming and builds shelter before the first drop of rain falls. Secrets don't stay buried forever, especially when you write them down. That was the first sentence I wrote in the little navy blue journal I bought from the bookstore on Whitaker Street. It was plain, unlined, and bound in leather that smelled of quiet determination. I tucked it into the drawer under my socks, a place Brandon would never look. He didn't fold his clothes. He barely knew where his underwear was. I didn't write much for the first week. Just notes, little observations. What time Brandon left, what time he got home, how many times he checked his phone at dinner. Did he bring his briefcase into the house or leave it in the car? I know that sounds paranoid. I hate myself for doing it. But part of me needed answers. She didn't care about her dignity anymore. She just wanted the truth. Elaine came more often, like clockwork. Twice a week, sometimes unannounced. She'd bring peach cobbler or meatballs, pretending they were just extras from last night. But I'd see the way her eyes scanned the kitchen like a general checking for holes in the defense. She'd hug me a little too tight and whisper things like, "I'm so proud of you for keeping this family together." As if she were rewarding me for playing dumb. One evening, as I was chopping carrots for soup, she slid a stew into the refrigerator and asked, "How's Brandon? Is work still keeping him up late?" Her tone was casual, but there was something in her voice that made me stop mid-chopping. "Yeah," I said, still looking at the cutting board, still home after 10. She made a sympathetic sound. "That's the property for you. There's always someone wanting to see the house after dinner." I didn't answer. I just nodded and dropped the carrots into the pot. But inside, something tightened. Elaine wasn't just checking. She was watching, covering. That night, after Brandon fell asleep face down, still in his work clothes, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. Nothing unusual. Mortgage, groceries, gas. But then I noticed something strange. Every month, like clockwork, a $600 payment was sent to a Venmo account under the name Casey Hart. The note simply read, "Consulting. We don't know Casey Hart." And Brandon never mentioned any consulting fees. I clicked on the account. Privacy settings were tight. No photos, no info. But I took screenshots, dated them, logged them. The next morning, I found him buttering his toast as if nothing had changed. I heard him kiss our daughter on the head and say he'd be late again. "Clients are flying in from Charlotte," he told me, sipping his coffee. "We're going to look at investment properties." I smiled and nodded like a Stepford wife. "Hopefully, it will be okay." But that evening, I called his office line. The receptionist answered. "Mr. Carter? He's on vacation today. Come back Thursday." I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just wrote it all down. By the end of the second week, the diary was filling up fast. timelines, quotes, actions. I never thought I was capable of this, living a double life in my own home. But I also never imagined I'd marry a man who lied so easily. Or have a mother-in-law who would oblige, as if it were all part of protecting the family brand. The creepiest moment happened on Wednesday. I had just picked up my daughter from school when Elaine called. Her voice was sweet, sugary sweet as usual. "Hey, honey. I was wondering if you and Emma wanted to come over for dinner. I made beef stew." I hesitated. I had nothing planned that evening, but something told me to say no. "Maybe this weekend," I said. "Emma has homework." There was a pause. "Just a beat too long." "Of course," she said. "Just let me know." "Okay," after hanging up. I checked the baby monitor app, which was still connected to the camera in the living room. We had installed it when Emma was little and never uninstalled it. I had forgotten it was still active until now. I tapped into the feed and fast-forwarded a few hours. And there she was. Elaine. She had come into the house. I froze. She must have used the spare key we gave her years ago. She walked through the kitchen like she owned the place. Wiped down the counters. Rearranged a few things. Then she headed straight into the study and picked up the diary. My heart stopped, but she didn't open it. She stared at it, touched the cover. Then, as if someone had tapped her on the shoulder, she quickly put it back and walked out. I stood in the kitchen, my daughter humming behind me, and I felt something change. Not fear, not even anger. Clarity. Elaine didn't just defend Brandon. She actively tried to control the narrative. She wasn't just a facilitator. She was a handler. That night, I moved the journal to a locked box in the attic. Password protected, backup photos saved to a cloud account under a pseudonym. If they were going to play games, I'd better play smart. The next day, I went to the bank and quietly opened a new checking account under my maiden name, Alyssa Graves. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't touched in years. Back home, I started looking into Casey Hart. A reverse search on Venmo led me to an Instagram profile that had been private until recently. Now, it was public. She was younger, blonde, fit, a yoga teacher in Charleston. There were a few autographed photos of Brandon in there, his clock on the table, the back of his car, a wine glass that matched our set. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Instead, I wrote, "The woman has a name, and now she has a face." Elaine came 2 days later. This time, she brought banana bread and a bouquet of lilies. I invited her in and offered her tea. We sat on the couch like two women in a Southern Living magazine. "I've always admired your calmness," she said, sipping her tea. "Even now, when things get tense." I looked at her, looked straight into her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Oh," she smiled. "You know, Brandon works so hard, and sometimes, well, people misunderstand things, jump to conclusions." I leaned forward and put the cup down. "Elaine," I said, my voice even, "is there anything you think I'm misunderstanding?" She blinked, tilted her head. No, I just think the family should talk before something small becomes a big deal." And that was it, a veiled warning. Southern politeness masking something rotten underneath. "I agree," I said. "That's why I took notes, to make sure I didn't misunderstand anything." Her cup froze mid-sentence. Just for a second. But I saw it. She didn't finish her cup of tea. When she left, I locked the door behind her and wrote one more sentence that night. She knows I know. And now, she's afraid of what I'll do next. I'm not scared anymore. I'm not confused anymore. I'm not even angry anymore. I am preparing. Prepare for the truth to come out. On my terms, in my time. If you want to know the truth, sometimes you have to accept a lie. The phrase didn't come to me out of nowhere, it had been following me. It lived in my head for days, tapping me on the shoulder every time Brandon offered a half-baked excuse, or Elaine showed up with a smile that was just a little too bright. The deeper I dug into this mess, the more I realized they weren't just lying, they were collaborating. This wasn't a one-on-one fumble. It was a setup, a cover-up, a team effort. And I'm not the only one without a script anymore. I bought a voice recorder online. Discreet, battery-powered, voice-activated. It looks like a plain black USB stick, but it's smart. It knows when someone is speaking. I tested it a few times, hidden it under a pile of magazines in the living room. Played some music, even coughed loudly. It only recorded voice. Perfect. Then I waited. A week later, my chance came. It was Friday. Brandon called me at noon to say he was running late again. Some emergency customer instructions had just come up. I didn't challenge him. I just said, "Drive safely," like the dutiful wife I was no longer. At 6:15 p.m., Elaine arrived. I hadn't even invited her in. She knocked as usual, firm, authoritative, and when I opened the door, she had her usual, "I'm here to help you hold your world together," look on her face. "I thought I'd bring some chicken pot pie over," she said. "I know you're busy." I smiled politely. "You always know exactly what I need." We sat in the living room, as usual. Emma was in her room, watching cartoons. I excused myself to check on her when I actually did. I stuffed the recorder under the sofa cushions behind Elaine's chair. My hands were shaking, but I knew I was doing the right thing. We talked for 30 minutes. Mostly, she did the talking, and I nodded. She kept steering the conversation toward trust, loyalty. Marriages are built on faith, not paranoia. Sometimes a wife needs to give a man space, subtle, gentle, but I could hear the panic behind her smile. She left before Brandon got home. I waited until everyone was asleep. Then I got the recorder. My hands shaking. I plugged it into my laptop. There it was. As soon as I stepped out of the room, Elaine picked up the phone. Her voice was clear. "Yes, I am here." "No, she doesn't know, but she is watching you. Be careful, Brandon. And for God's sake, don't leave any more receipts." She found a receipt from Le Méridien. "I told her you were with me." Then silence. And then, "If you screw this up, she'll marry Emma, and I won't let you lose your daughter over a quick fling." My vision blurred. I sat there, listening to it again and again. She lied, openly, coldly, protected him without flinching. And now I had it, her voice, her words, her warning. This is not just a matter of saving face. This is a matter of control, manipulation, fear. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, counting the cracks in the drywall, thinking about how long I'd been living someone else's drama. The perfect wife, the grateful daughter-in-law, the supportive mother. And they thought I was weak enough to stay in the dark. By morning, something inside me became clearer. If they want to play dirty, then I have no choice but to play smart. I need more than that. A recording is not enough. I have to collect all the pieces of this puzzle, because the moment I face them, it will be war. And I need to win. I started with Brandon's phone. I waited until Sunday morning, when he was in the shower. I walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up his phone like I was checking the weather. It is locked, but I'd seen his code before in December, when he was ordering Emma's Christmas present, 0423, Elaine's birthday. Of course, I unlocked it. My heart raced as I scrolled through his messages. Most of them were clean. Too clean. Like someone had gone through them and deleted them all. But one subject caught my attention. A series of messages labeled C, Ch, no full name, only initials. Can't wait to see you again. Miss Saturday night. She still doesn't suspect, be careful. Don't let her find the furnace. Burner. That night I checked his drawer, his briefcase, his car, and there it was, hidden in the glove compartment under an old box of chewing gum and an expired registration. A cheap prepaid flip phone, no lock screen, no password. I opened the message. There she was, Casey Hart, the yoga teacher from Charleston, the woman from Venmo, the woman I'd been staring at on Instagram for weeks, still thinking about the weekend. You always make me feel safe. Elaine is a saint. I owe her so much. I felt nauseous. Still, I read every word. She said Alyssa is curious, wants you to be quiet for a bit. Don't worry, she won't find out unless I let her. I closed the phone, breathed, didn't scream, didn't cry, just breathed. Then I turned it off, slid it back into place, and recorded it all. That night, I made a decision. I will collect the last pieces of this lie. Then I will burn their scripts. The next day, I called in sick. Dropped Emma off at school. Drove 2 hours to Charleston. Headed straight to Casey's yoga studio. I didn't go in. I sat in the parking lot. I looked out the window at her. She was younger than me, taller, tan. The kind of woman who always wore the same leggings and had thousands of followers who liked pictures of her holding green juice. She doesn't look evil, but Elaine didn't do that either. As she left the studio, I followed her, not too closely, just enough to see where she was going. A small beach house. The same one Brandon had rented for a conference weekend 2 months ago. Everything is fine. Every lie, every location, every cover-up. I have the proof. Voice recordings, text messages, the disposable phone, the timeline. Now all I need is that moment. I drove home in silence. When I turned around, Brandon was there, cooking dinner, as if nothing had changed, as if the man I had married hadn't become the stranger I now watched like prey. Hey, he said, smiling. I think I'll make your favorite tonight. Chicken marsala. I smiled back. You always know exactly what I need, and I mean it. Because what I need now is one final move. A perfect setup. One dinner. A confrontation. A trap. And I will invite both of you. They don't know that I stopped pretending. Brandon thought we were still dancing in the dark. Elaine thought I was still the quiet, obedient daughter-in-law who turned pain into grace and smiled in the face of betrayal. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I had stepped off the stage. I was no longer part of their little performance. I am writing my own ending, and I decided it would all start with dinner. I invited both of them, Brandon and Elaine, to a family meal. Something that would bring us closer together. That's how I phrased it in the group text. I think we need some time together. Let's sit down, just the three of us. Elaine replied within 2 minutes. Sounds great, Alyssa. I'm glad you took this step. I'll bring dessert. Of course she will, Brandon replied more slowly. Okay, tell me what time. I picked Thursday, 7 p.m., right after Emma's bedtime. I asked my neighbor, Lisa, to put her back to bed, telling her that Brandon and I needed time to reconnect. Lisa smiled with that understanding look that only other moms truly understand. She She didn't ask any questions, just hugged me and said, "Do what you need to do." That night, I cleaned the house as if I were preparing for an open casket, wiped down every surface, lighted candles, set out the beautiful plates we'd received as wedding gifts and never used. I even wore the soft blue dress that Brandon had said made me look like the kind of woman who fits in a magazine. Let them think I'm trying. Let them think I still care. At 6:55, Elaine arrived first, punctual as always, carrying a plate of foil-wrapped cupcakes and a bottle of wine. "You look beautiful," she said, stepping inside, her eyes scanning the house like a hawk. "Is Emma asleep?" "She's at Lisa's tonight." Elaine's lips pursed, just slightly. "Oh, how clever." Brandon arrived 5 minutes later, tie loosened, hair still wet from a quick shower. He kissed my cheek like it was Thursday. "Smells wonderful," he said, glancing around. "Chicken marsala again. My favorite." He smiled. I almost feel sorry for him. We sat at the table. I poured the wine, passed the bread. The atmosphere between us was stiff, too polite, like a dinner party no one wanted to throw. Elaine filled the silence with small-talk church events, a friend's back surgery, how peach prices were going. Brandon nodded occasionally, but he was looking at me. I could feel it, like he knew something had changed, but he didn't know what it was. Not yet. Halfway through my main course, I put down my fork, took a sip of wine, and said, "I've been thinking a lot lately about trust and how hard it is to rebuild once it's broken." Both were stunned, just slightly stunned, but then quickly hid that feeling. Elaine tilted her head. "Honey, if something is bothering you, we can talk. Communication is the first step to healing." Brandon reached for his glass. "Yeah, is everything okay?" I smiled. "I just want to understand one thing. You know, like, how can someone wire money to a woman named Casey Hart every month and expect his wife not to find out?" Silence fell like a falling plate. Elaine blinked. Brandon's hand stopped in midair. "What are you talking about?" he said too quickly. I leaned back in my chair. "Venmo. Brandon, you labeled it consulting. You're not that creative." Elaine jumped in, her voice suddenly high and tense. "Now? Alyssa, I'm sure there's an explanation. Always," I interrupted, calmly, "like the way you told me Brandon had dinner with you the night he was at Le Méridien, or the way you warned him to stop leaving receipts. You remember that? Right?" Her face turned the color of wet chalk. Now I could see the panic lurking beneath her skin. "You've been following us," Brandon shouted, eyes wide. I returned his gaze, steadfast. "No. I was defending myself. You see, I recorded that conversation. Elaine, the conversation you had in my living room when you thought I was upstairs checking on Emma?" Elaine's fork touched her plate. Her hand was shaking. "That's illegal," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just..." I interrupted her. "Actually, in Georgia, it's a one-party state. That means I just need to mine permission." Brandon looked like he had just swallowed a handful of nails. "You were eavesdropping on the house," he hissed. "I wrote down the truth," I replied, "because none of you wanted to tell the truth." I slowly stood up, reached into a drawer near my desk, and pulled out a manila folder. Thick, neat, organized. I slid it across the desk. "In there, you'll find printouts of your text messages. Brandon, screenshots of your disposable phone conversations with Casey, GPS logs, even photos of the two of you outside her Charleston studio. You're not very discreet. His face turned pale. Elaine was silent and trembling at this moment. You planned this, she whispered. You set us up. No, I said softly. You did. I finally decided not to ignore it anymore. For a long moment, no one moved. The wine is still there. The candles flickered between us like witnesses. And then I spoke again, this time with the finality of a door closing. I want this dinner to be so you both understand one thing. It's over. The lies. The games. The way you think you can manage me like I'm some weak little girl. Brandon suddenly stood up, angrily saying, So what, you think you're going to take Emma away from me? No, I replied. You did. The moment you chose to put yourself above your family, Elaine looked like she was about to cry. But I felt nothing. Not rage, not even satisfaction. Just let go. I gathered the dishes and headed into the kitchen. Behind me, I could hear Brandon flipping through files, swearing under his breath. Elaine was mumbling, probably praying. I didn't care. I washed my hands, pour yourself the last glass of wine, and I smiled. Because I have everything I need, now it's my turn. Sometimes the strongest action is to walk away. I woke up the morning after dinner with a feeling I hadn't felt in years, weightlessness. Not like the feeling one gets after a long cry or a good night's sleep. No, this feeling was different. Not relief or peace or even victory. That is obvious. For a long time, I waited for someone else to fix the cracks in my life, Brandon. Elaine, time, faith. But clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from taking action. And I did what I needed to do. I packed slowly, quietly. I'm in no hurry. I'm moving forward. Emma was still asleep in the living room at Lisa's. The sun hadn't even warmed the sky yet. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, my bedroom, for now folding clothes into duffel bags. Each shirt and sock, a keepsake I no longer owed anyone. I didn't need much. A few essentials. The rest I could rebuild. What mattered now was space. Space to breathe. Space to choose again. By 8 a.m., I had filed my separation papers. My attorney Dana, a brilliant divorce attorney recommended by Lisa, told me that I had enough evidence to ask for full custody and a clear division of assets. She even called the disposable phone a gift from the universe. By 9:30, I had opened a new account at a private bank under my maiden name, Alyssa Graves. That name used to sound like something I was leaving behind. Now, it felt like a suit of armor. I didn't tell Brandon. I didn't need to. He'd get the message soon, at noon. I picked Emma up and took her to the diner down the street for pancakes. We laughed over whipped cream and chocolate chips. She told me about her dreams, something about a dragon in a tutu, and I listened as if it were the most important story in the world. Because it is true. She did. And I will never let her grow up thinking that what I endured is what love is supposed to feel like. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, lit by a single lamp, and typed out an email, subject to save attachments, audio recording, photo evidence, financial records, body Brandon. This is not a conversation. This is a conclusion. The evidence speaks for itself. I have made my decision. I am not angry. I'm not afraid. I just finished. Alyssa. I don't CC Elaine. She'll find out soon enough. Besides, I want her to sit quietly and not know anything just this once. When I clicked the send button, my hand didn't even shake. That's how I knew I was free. The next few days passed quickly. Brandon showed up at the house. Of course. At first angry, then desperate, then pathetic. He knocked on the door for 20 minutes straight. I didn't answer. The next morning, I went downstairs to find a bouquet of white roses sitting on the porch. No note, just flowers, as if they could erase years of betrayal and control. I left them there, let the sun wither them. Elaine never came, but she left a voicemail. Alyssa, honey, I know you're hurting, but think of Emma. A family can't survive without someone willing to sacrifice. That's what I did for Brandon. What would you do for her? I did not answer, because I did it for Emma. And for myself too. For all the women who have been told to shut up, to keep the peace, to work things out even if it breaks them. 2 weeks later, I moved out. Lisa helped me pack. Emma danced between boxes as if it were a game, not a goodbye. We found a small rental on the other side of town, modest, bright, quiet, just enough room for a mother and daughter to start over. The first night there, I opened the windows and let the air in every room. I let the silence in, no screaming, no lying, no pretending. Just us. Just the facts. A few days after we settled in, I found the blue diary again, stuffed into the bottom of one of the moving boxes. I hadn't written anything in it since dinner that night. I turned to the last page, and then I wrote, "They lied to me, they used me, but they didn't break me. I brought something they couldn't steal, my truth, and I will never, never trade it for silence again." It's strange, the things you realize after you leave. Just like how much quieter your thoughts will become when you stop explaining your pain to the people who caused it. Or how powerful you feel when you choose yourself, fully, without regret. Sometimes people say divorce is a failure, but now I don't believe that anymore. Keeping silent when lying, that is failure. Raising a daughter who thinks love should be like walking on eggshells, that's a failure. Leave with your self-respect, intelligence, and your child's future intact. That is courage. That is success. That is freedom. There are betrayals that make us feel like we can't get back up, but it is in those dark moments that the strong woman in us is born. Alyssa did not choose noisy revenge. She chose the harder thing, leaving in silence, with dignity and the truth in hand. This story isn't just about cheating or lying. It's about courage. About letting go of a relationship that's no longer worth it. About setting boundaries. Not because you're weak, but because you know your worth. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt left out, unheard, or manipulated, remember, you're not alone. And you have the power to change your life. Just like Alyssa did. If you find this story touching, please like, comment with your thoughts, or share the video with someone who also needs a reminder that they deserve true love. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because in the next video, we will come to the story. She didn't know I was recording every conversation, and now I have proof. A surprise twist awaits you. See you again.